Leap of Fate podcast fans. Welcome to this week's episode with yours truly, Randy Silver. What is a leap of fate? You all know it, but just to restate, it is overcoming adversity, overcoming any challenges in your daily life. We talk about the highs and lows of what you can do to be successful. I just want to say thank you to everybody so much for all the feedback you've given me on the past couple episodes. We had my episode talking about my new job via Clubhouse. We had my dad come on last week, talk about insurance, all this type of stuff to enable your success. In that same vein, I have my guest, Lindsey Locke, on this week. She's the host of Get Psyched Podcast. Lindsey is personally a good friend of my life, but I'm also, I look up to her. She's extremely successful. She runs her own podcast. She helps people in their daily life. She already owns a house in Mexico. So she's been really, really successful in making something in her life. And I think she's on today. She'll provide you so much great mindset, how to be successful, and how to just go make your dreams happen. So I'm very excited to have Lindsey on. Thank you guys for all the great feedback. Let's get right into it. Lindsey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. What a good segue. Like, I've been on a handful of shows, and that was by far the one that made me like the most rosy cheeked.
So look at that. We already got Lindsey blushing.
I'm blushing.
So Lindsey, I think, as you said, I gave you a good overview. Love for you to give the audience quickly just a review, who you are, where you came from, and how did you get to where you're at today?
Oh, man. I'll try to put that all into a nutshell.
It's a big question, I know.
So it was a sunny day, April 21st, 92.
Ooh, not April 20th?
Not April 20th, I know. April 21st. Birthday's around the corner. So yeah, I grew up in a tiny little town, a Northern California town, and after high school moved to Santa Cruz, California. And went to college there. And so I went from arguably like one of the most conservative pockets of California to like one of the most liberal pockets of California.
Shout out banana slugs.
Shout out slugs. And it became really clear to me that like a huge part of me was in both worlds. I'm self-proclaimed redneck with hippie tendencies because I feel like that is my most authentic self. And it took a lot of trials and tribulations and just life experience to be willing to show up in the world the way that feels most authentic to me. And so I was so stuck between how can I feel like so confident with a Coors Light in my hands, but also be like so willing to do all this like woo-woo hippie stuff, right? And so I went back to school. I got my master's in counseling psychology, and I'm now a holistic therapist. So I work with clients ranging from all ages, all gender identities, and anything in between, to work on a lot of things, but mostly what it boils down to for so many people is like finding their authentic truth and their simple truth and how to live in alignment with that. So you pair that with the fact that I've been working in the health and fitness industry for the last 10 years. And I kind of get to swirl it all up to make this really like holistic picture for a lot of people. And that was kind of how Get Psyched was born. I was having really incredible conversations with other therapists in the space, healers, shamans, athletes, holistic nutritionists. And I was like, dang, like, why aren't these conversations being shared? So that was kind of what fed that podcast. And here I am, kind of a amalgamation of it all.
And you guys can see that's why I wanted to bring her on is she talks about holistic lifestyle, being true with oneself, being happy with oneself and being successful. That's exactly what I try to preach every day. So in our off podcast, when Lindsey and I hang out and we talk, we have these types of conversations. So she's been someone on my guest list for a long time, and I'm happy to bring her on. So I'd like to start today with Get Psyched. You said you're having these conversations with awesome people. To give yourself a quick PR promo, what is Get Psyched? How can people listen to it?
Totally. So Get Psyched is on any of your favorite podcast platforms. I prefer Apple Podcasts if you guys are listening there, because you can leave that 5-star rating and review. You like that plug?
Plug it, baby.
While you guys are there, leave this show a 5-star rating and review. Yeah, Get Psyched. It was funny because I have felt like I've been in the personal development world for a really long time. Um, in 2015, I lost my dad really
Mm.
unexpectedly. And it threw me into just like this dark spiral. And if you want to call it rock bottom, like that's where I was at. And as I started kind of like crawling my way out, I was like, I think everyone at some point has heard that like you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most of your time with.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked around and I was like, I don't want to be any of the people that I'm spending my time with.
Mm.
And so as I'm like crawling out of this dark hole, I started reaching out to people that like not had something that I wanted from like a materialistic standpoint, but were like living the life that I wanted to lead, that seemed to have it, quote unquote, it figured out. And I reached out to all of them and I started centering myself around them and reading the books, listening to the podcasts, getting my hands on the articles that they were suggesting, and just opening up my mind to the personal development world and what healing and growth looked like.
Mm.
So basically from 2015 on, I've kind of been in this continual pursuit of figuring out who I am, where I am, what my place is in the world. And years ago, my best friend had told me like, hey, you should start a podcast. He had one. I had been on his show a bunch. And there was a bunch of really positive feedback from it. And as exciting as and enticing as that sounded, my imposter syndrome was just like through the roof. I was like, sick compliment, dude, but like, no, who would want to listen to me? Like, I have nothing. And he's like, you have life experience, you have all these different things. And then I think what finally gave me the ultimate push was going to school. And I wanted to feel informed. I wanted to feel like I had read a lot of books and I had done a lot of biohacking and I had done like, I think we are all our own best experiment. So like always practice what you preach, try what it is that you're going to tell other people to do. And I felt like I
Mm-hmm.
had done that from the experience standpoint, but I wanted like that much more oomph behind it and like have the degree, be trauma informed, understand kind of the ins and outs of it. And so then it just got really, really clear. Like it was so clear that that was what I was supposed to do because I was having conversations with people that were completely changing my life, touching my life, changing the way I looked at the world, the way I looked at business and relationships and different problems. And I was like building my toolbox. And having come from the little tiny conservative town I was from, I remember when I started making these shifts, not even knowing that that was like an option on the menu. It took like listening to these things that felt very countercultural to be able to even start thinking in that way. And so with Get Psyched, my goal was just like, if I can have one person listen to it, one person that I like went to grammar school with or something, and they get their hands on an episode because we have like that small town tie or whatever it is. And they start to just like change their life or be willing and be brave enough to change their mind in the tiniest bit, then like Get Psyched would be successful.
I love that. That's exactly what I say is I can make an impact on one person's life and help them with whatever they're dealing with in their life. Then it makes that whole week, that whole month of effort to get that episode out so worth it. So worth it. So a lot of people, as you said, are scared to start podcasting or put podcasting. What are some key lessons that you've learned from podcasting to, one, gain an audience, gain a following, and make sure that you optimize yourself every week to be successful recording, editing, all that goes with it?
Totally. I think the biggest thing, and this translates to every single area in my life, is like having the courage to ask a guest to be on your show.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember sitting down and like lighting my incense and getting super intentional and like dream boarding out like what guests I would want. Yeah, right. Like Sky Daddy, please like let this happen, right? And And I had this list. So I had this list of people that I was thankfully already connected with that gave the show legs that I am so, so, so grateful for. But then I kept looking at this list that was like, I want to ask this person and this person, but how do I do it? What would I do? And I don't know what it was that changed the mindset for me, but it was like, Lindsey, the absolute worst case scenario here is that the person says no. That's it. Like a person says no, and like, bummer. Like on to the next one, you take what's that like super cliche Michael Jordan quote, like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Exactly.
Like that's what it feels like. It was like, okay, so the absolute worst thing that's going to happen is someone's going to say no. And to this day, I have never received a no. Because
really?
Yeah.
It's also because people love talking about themselves. So when you give them the forum to talk about themselves,
yes!
They love it.
They love it. Everyone loves it. I mean, even just like practice it in your normal everyday life. Like you go out to dinner or go grab a beer with a friend and you like get really intentional and you make eye contact with that person and you have some questions you want to ask them. Like you will probably ask your 4 questions and your friend will just talk and gush because we really don't, like, between work and now like shelter in place is kind of sort of lifting, but it's like we are starved for connection. We are starved to talk, and like people love to do that. And then from like the business side of it, it's like you're getting a long form conversation with somebody. It's not a 15-second soundbite. It's not a caption that someone's just going to scroll past. People can get really, really passionate and have really incredible conversations, and you get like insight into that person's life. On top of that, if you're like, hey, could you come be a guest? Could you come talk about yourself for an hour?
No, I hate that. No, thank you.
No. And with the week your episode launches, I'm going to supply you with an audiogram, with graphics to do this, to do that. Like I am going to create content for you, because anyone that's in the content space runs into the like, oh, like I have nothing to post, or like, oh, I don't have any content. So if you're hosting a show and you are basically like footing all this work for someone to give you an hour of their day, like most often I haven't found that you run into a no. Unless and then if someone does say no, like
on to the next one.
You don't want them on your show anyway. It would probably be a super sterile conversation and really forced.
Yeah, I agree. Like when I had my dad on last week, he's like, I've never done a podcast before. Like, I don't want to be on camera. I've done yours where it's audio, but I was like, Dad, you're on the Zoom call every day talking to stuff with your coworkers and clients. How's that any different than you talking to your son and then me just creating a video and putting it on Instagram? And he goes, you know what? That's a good point. Why not? And I think it turned out great. Right. So like, it's exactly what you just said, is people just need to feel comfortable with getting in front of the camera and doing it.
Absolutely. And now is like, you are in a market where it is the time to do it. If you are thinking about starting a podcast, like tell your imposter syndrome to kick rocks, because right now, like from like a nerdy standpoint, there was a long time when podcasts had like a certain quality, like audio quality, that was the industry standard. And so internet interviews were not they were kind of poo-pooed on because your audio wasn't perfect. Poo-pooed. And now like the industry standard is Zoom. And if you have Zoom, like your like ability to reach out, your guest pool just exploded, because you can talk to people all over the world now.
What do you use for your podcasting? What type of microphone? How do you edit? Things like that.
Yeah. So I have these really cool headsets.
Yeah. She looks like a gamer right now. Go play some Fortnite with Lindsey after this.
I do. I've never gotten into Fortnite, but I was very, very into like hacking zombies back in the day on Call of Duty. So if I get another gaming center, maybe you can find me at like Get Psyched Zombie Crusher 22 or something like that.
Sick.
But yeah, I love the headsets. My dad was a pilot, so I grew up with headsets, so I feel like low key at home in them. And I think that they do a really great job. If you're looking to be portable with your show, I literally use a Zoom recorder. It's a handheld Zoom recorder. And then your headset plugs into your audio. And so it's picking up, like I'm able to hear my guests, they're able to hear me, and it's also picking up their audio. and it pulls like those 2 tracks. I pull them off the SD card, and then I edit in Audacity. It's a really easy interface. It's pretty like drag and drop. I've tried as best I can to like make as many static things in my podcast as possible. So the only like 3 changing things are my intro and then my audio and my guest's audio. Everything else is pretty standardized. Like I have my static intro. I have, if I'm going to put an ad in the show, I have that already built out so that I'm not trying to recreate the wheel every episode.
Got it.
So having like all of that dialed is super helpful from a sound engineering standpoint.
Yeah, and just to give you guys some more context, when she says like very static, that means like it's a pre-recorded intro that she can just drop into each one. So the meat of the podcast is obviously new with the new guests every week, but pretty much what she's doing is automating the beginning. There's an ad in there at the end of it. So that way it's like, hey, this is Lindsey Locke with Get Psyched, blah, 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 in this week's episode. Then she goes into this week's episode, and that part's the new part week over week.
Yes, exactly. And I have to shout out Soulfire Productions.
Shout out Soulfire.
Shout out. They're incredible. Connor is my best friend that told me to start the show years ago. And him and his partner, Kelly founded Soulfire. They're so great. If you don't know anything about this, like anything Randy and I are talking today about audio and production and post-production and doing all these things, even like down to the like, you don't make any of that. You send all of your audio to them. Their team blends it for you. Their team creates audiograms and graphics and does like this whole marketing for you. So if all of this sounds like a second language, you can also check out Soulfire, and they've got it dialed in for you.
So Soulfire is basically outsourced editing. You just get the content created, aka record your podcast, and they'll do everything else for you.
Yep.
Awesome.
And they have different tiers. So it's kind of like what packages you want. And we do like monthly masterminds, which are really awesome. We sit down, Connor and Kelly talk about what's trending in the space right now. How can you optimize different things through, we had a whole mastermind on Clubhouse. Like if you guys are podcasters and you're not on Clubhouse, like get on there, because it's literally, it's a breeding ground for our audience. There are already people who want to be listening to the type of content that we're creating, and you can just like completely change and overhaul and boost your following there. So we did a whole mastermind on that, right? And there were so many people. I was shocked. There were so many people in this collective that weren't on Clubhouse yet. So we talk about different ways to create a following, ways to optimize your platform. They also, like I said, create all your graphics and do all these different things. So depending on what level of package you want, they've got something for just about every level of podcaster out there.
And if you guys go to the comments or you go into the bio of this podcast, you will see Soulfire right here. So click that link. And also, if you just have any idea what Clubhouse is, if you live on the rock, you're like, what is Clubhouse? Click the links above me right here, and you'll see my podcast about Clubhouse and the power of it. So I think we got the good idea about podcasting, what you got into it. Let's talk about the meat of Get Psyched Podcast now. You said that you have a lot of interesting conversations talking about holistic health, everything like that. Do you have any top favorite conversations you have, or a common theme that comes up potentially episode over episode?
My dog is barking. First and foremost, don't have your dog present when you are recording. That is like rule number 1.
This shows you this is a real podcast, everyone.
It's real.
Hypothetically, if you're listening to this over audio, I apologize, but I'm going to keep this in because I think this is just goes with the nature of what podcasting is all about.
Yeah, you roll with the punches. That is for sure. I always tell him when he starts barking, I'm like, dude, you're better than that. And then he gets really embarrassed and lays down. Anyway, common themes. So Get Psyched, it's a double entendre, right? Like I sat down for so long trying to figure out what I wanted to call my show. And I am someone who says psyched all the time, almost to like an embarrassing amount now, because my friends are like, oh, you got to be on brand. And I'm like, no, I made the brand fit me, right? So that's huge. Like that is what started this. So it has a double entendre. Like, I want people to be psyching. I want people to be happy. I want people to be in a good mood, right? And I'm a therapist, so I can talk about the psychology behind a lot of the topics that get brought up on the show. Originally, I had the intention of just interviewing other therapists, talking, kind of like demystifying therapy for people, stomping out the shame. Thank you. Stomping out the shame and stigma, or how do I find a therapist, or what is Gestalt work? What is internal family systems? What are these different things? Which there are episodes that do that. But then it just got clear to me that I was like, okay, these conversations are filling me up, but so are my conversations with some of my like plant medicine practitioners and with people who are professional athletes and anything in between. And so just sitting down with people that I was psyched to talk about. And we do get into that because I think that you attract what you put out. And so if I'm putting out in the world that, hey, this is the intentional conversation that I'm having, I'm setting this container to have these sorts of conversations, like we do end up talking about all sorts of psychology when it's happening. But it lands a little bit more for people because we're real people talking about real things happening in our lives. So that's kind of the gist of it.
And when you were talking about psychology, obviously it's a very wide range things. How deep are you guys getting? Is it very personal conversations geared towards you, or is it more generalizations talking about how people can enact potentially new techniques in their life to feel like they are moving to a more holistic lifestyle?
I think both. I share a lot. Vulnerability has kind of been my process in general because during that like deep dark hole that I was crawling out of in 2015, I realized how afraid I was to be vulnerable. And I read Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. For anyone who has not read that, please go check it out. It changed my life. I read it every year and it hits different every year depending on the season of my life that I'm in.
Oh, wow.
And I realized that I was so afraid to be vulnerable that it was probably the most courageous thing that I could do if I was that afraid, like that scared to do it. And since starting to share my story and coming out about, what it was like to lose a parent, what it was like to have your other parent be a single mother, addict, alcoholic, to share these different life experiences that were like my shadow, with people, gave them the opportunity to share theirs and gave them the opportunity to feel less alone in their experience. And none of us want to feel different. If I not talking podcasting at all, but if I lean into my, therapist practice, all of us want to feel normal. All of us want to feel connection at a base level. That's all we are seeking, is to be seen. So with my show, I think that I attract guests that have that same intention and are willing to share. When I bring on experts, like my buddy Mike, he is a combo practitioner, and we talked all about combo. And
what's combo?
Combo is it's a ceremony. So it's basically comes from the excretion of a tree frog.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's intense. Here we go. Here's Lindsey getting woo-woo.
Let's go for
it. Combo is called the warrior's medicine. And so Lindsey, who's like a doer and super leaned into her masculine, was like, I want some warrior medicine. And basically what they do is they burn just like the first superficial layer of skin. And this tree frog secretion comes off as a little resin, and they drop it onto the burn marks. And it almost immediately hits you, and it's incredibly detoxifying. It asks you to purge quite a lot. And anyone who has sat with any sort of medicine in that sense knows that purging can be, vomit. It can be a lower body purge, but it can also be tears or laughter or anything that your body needs to get out. And so we talked all about like how something like that medicine has torn me down faster than anything else. Like it brought me down to like, oh man, like that was really, really hard. And I wanted to talk to Mike about it, right? Like you're a practitioner, you know, all the ins and outs of it. And so we talked a lot about, you know, the tools and what it takes to do it, but also the spiritual side of like, what is it that this medicine does? So I think that there's a lot of like tips and tricks and to-dos on the show, but I also talk to so many people that are in such a spiritual space that it's also like, how can you integrate that and make it your own? How does your experience fit into this? If your curiosity is piqued, where do you start? You know, when do journeys like this begin? So it is anything in between vulnerability and tips and tricks.
Got it. I love that. And some people might be scared to say, for lack of a better term, purge themselves or do something like that, put some in a body they're not for. But I think in the grander scale, what you're saying is also like just being present in the moment. And I feel like sometimes therapy has a bad connotation, or I'm gonna go speak to your counselor. It's so rewarding to just get whatever is on your chest and talk to someone who has no judgment, who has no position inside of it. They're just there to let you speak and offer advice or help you understand what is at the core and get you there. And that's what I love about therapy and speaking to people, counselors. I've had some over my time, is I just feel so much better after, because I'm able to get off my chest what I need to get off of. I'm able to move on with my day and move forward and feel like I'm in a better headspace and understand what I need to do to move forward. It sounds like you offer that space, obviously, for your clients, but in your podcast for people to speak about this as well.
Yeah, it's funny because I think if there's any therapist listening to the show, I'm sure you guys have gotten this. People are like, I typically don't tell people I'm a therapist. I tell people I work in the fitness industry.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't tell people because typically people are like, have you been psychoanalyzing me? And I'm like, no, because you're not paying me. And two, it's really exhausting for me to do that. And because when you're in therapy, you're here with the person, like you're on this plane and you're connecting, but you also have this bird's eye view and you're like going through your Rolodex of like, what's in the DSM-5, what is this potential diagnosis? If that's the potential diagnosis, what's the intervention that I want to use? And how can we get this person to start identifying these things, right? If I did that in all of my friendships, I would be exhausted. I'd get nothing done.
We'd be at El Perez. You'd be like, sorry, guys. I need to go over there for a moment and go take a shot. I can't handle this right now.
I can't handle this. Yeah. So it's funny because people talk a lot about like, oh, how do you turn it off? How do you turn it off? And it's like truly, and that was a practice, but truly now it's like, oh, I just don't turn it on unless I need to. And because it's true, like you cannot be in that state of presence with somebody to the extent at which therapy deserves without like setting that intention of doing that. And El Prez is not that container, right? So, it's definitely the container that is created. I think that we're slowly starting to move away from the shame, where people are like, oh, you're in therapy, like you're broken or there's something wrong. I think that the pandemic did a really good job of being like, you're going to be alone at home with your thoughts for a while. And if you want to talk with somebody, like, let us know. And people were starting to share more and more. Yeah. So I think mental health slowly.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. My apologies, but I think you're so right that mental health, especially in the pandemic, has become so much more normalized, where people feel comfortable talking about it or sharing they're having issues, versus take it back to years ago, it still probably was very taboo and something that you didn't talk about.
Oh yeah, and like this is actually a thought that I'm currently having right now, so I'm sorry if I don't articulate it that great. I've actually never thought about it this way. But I think that with the pandemic, it affected all of us. So what I was saying before about we just want to be seen, we want to have our shadows, we're afraid to share our shadows, but when we do share them and there's a connection, we feel really seen and we feel really good about getting that off of our chest, and we feel normal, right? Quote unquote normal, whatever that is. And with the pandemic, we had shared suffering. Like I could talk to you about what was going on with you, and you could talk to someone in a different state about what was going on with them. And we're all in this shared suffering together. And so I think that kind of brought it to the surface of like, oh, I do have this connection. And like, yes, it's tied to so many different mental health things. And now I'm giving I've been given the opportunity or the stage to talk about these things because it's a collectively shared understanding now. Again, that's something that I'm like just kind of working through right this second. But I think my hope is that post-pandemic, that trajectory will continue. Like there's only so much sourdough bread you can make until you like decide to like get clear on your thoughts. And two, my hope is that when we do go back to whatever normal life looks like, that we have so much gratitude for the simple things, for going and grabbing a beer without a mask on with your friend, for being able to hug someone that just got off an airplane, right? That you haven't seen in a long time. Those little things that we kind of just took for granted. I really, really hope that we have a heightened sense of gratitude.
I could not say it any better. I completely agree. And I've always loved my life like that. I know that you have too. So I really do hope that as a society and as a world together, that we don't fall back into our old trends and our old ways of life, which kind of leads me down third base as we get towards the end of this podcast. What do you see in the people who come to you when they're asking, hey, Lindsey, what's some advice for this? What's some advice for this? What are some of the top things that you tell people are like, hey, these are the practices, what you should be doing. This is how you should live your life to make sure that you're in the right holistic mindset.
Yeah. I have, so there's this misconceived notion that therapists are going to figure it out for you. And that's kind of not what we do. And when you come to therapy, you're like, how do I fix it? It's like, I don't have a magic wand. I can't tell you. What I can do is help you get clear on what it is. At the end of the day, you are the common denominator in every experience that you're having, whether it is like relationships, right? I keep talking to people, they're like, oh, I'm in a toxic relationship. I'm in this toxic relationship. My last relationship was toxic. And it was like, okay, then you're dating all these different partners and it's ending in the same way, or the same patterns are coming up. And A, what are you calling in? What are you attracting in, either consciously or subconsciously? And B, if you're the common denominator of all of those things, how can we clean up your side of the street so that you are not recreating this learning tool to try to learn from?
Yes.
And so I think that, and I talk about it all the time. I think I even said at the beginning of this show, like, I reserve the right to change my mind at any time. And I think that is what I want to normalize more than anything. Like if you read a new book, you watched a new movie, you read an article, you had a life experience that completely shifted your perception of something, you reserve the right to change your opinion on whatever that matter is. And I think that so often when we start to explore and change our minds and get curious about these different parts of ourselves, it's really uncomfortable. Joe Dispenza calls it the river of change. And you get stuck in this river between your old way of thinking and this new way of thinking. And you're kind of like in the currents and it feels really uncomfortable. And it would be really easy to go back to the shore that feels super comfortable. But if you have the courage to get to the other side, you've got to weather the river. And when you're in that river, it's uncomfortable for you and it's uncomfortable for other people around you, because everyone has put me in a box and they labeled it Lindsey. And Lindsey responds in this way. She has this sense of humor. She's always willing to do this, whatever it is, whatever our experience together has created the box that is Lindsey. So when I start stepping out of that, or I start changing that, it's uncomfortable for me because I'm leaning into new experience, but it's also uncomfortable for all of those around me because they're like, wait a minute, like that's acting out of character. I haven't seen Lindsey act like that before. And so what I work with a lot with my clients is like, your boundaries do not have to be justified. They don't have to be like, you don't have to say no because XYZ. Like, no is an okay thing to say. As you are starting to change and you are starting to become the person that you want to become, there is going to be so much pushback, but it doesn't mean that your growth is not worth it. It doesn't mean that you need to make justifications or minimize your wants and desires or change your boundary to account for other people. It just means that like the obstacle is the way, and you're going to have to like push through that discomfort to become that new person.
That's awesome. I feel like I'm about to cry. That was so beautiful. And like, again, they take it to the loft listeners who are out there, and you guys listen week over week. We always talk about this. As Lindsey just at the very end, you have to break out of your comfort zones. When a goal is there or you have something you want to achieve, it's not going to be easy. 99% of the people in the world, we're not born into just everything is handed to us. We have to go make it happen. And you have to get used to being uncomfortable to make it happen. If that means you have to reach out to get people to come on your podcast, if that means you got to go back to school to get the education, to get to that job, whatever that may be, you need to have the belief in yourself and be okay with the uncomfortableness that will come with whatever you're trying to achieve. Because in the end, that gratification of achieving that success will be so worth it. And you'll look down back at yourself and say, hey, I just came from there. Now I'm here. And it will be that much more gratifying.
Absolutely. And like, have the courage to know that your path might not look like everyone else's. Like, we don't have to tear a page out of someone else's book. Get curious about what is lighting your soul on fire and follow that. You know, there's plenty of people that are super successful and didn't go back to school, or there's people that are went to all the schooling and now are in a job that they hate and they don't want to leave it because they put all of their eggs in that basket. So be willing to get really, really curious about yourself, your desires, your wants, where you want to be, get intentional about it. Like, we talk about, oh, what's your like 1, 3, 5, 10-year plans? But like, seriously, what is it? And like, now, if you figure those things out, can you align your actions with your end goal and make sure that you're acting in integrity with both? Because a lot of times,
keep going.
Yeah, a lot of times we'll chase a carrot that we don't even realize why we're chasing it anymore. We think we need to check that box, but it's actually not in alignment with what the goal is. So making sure that we're being really intentional and setting those actions in place.
I love that. And what is Lindsey's plan for Get Psyched 1, 3, 5, 10 years moving forward?
Oh man, 1, 3, 5 years moving forward on Get Psyched. It's funny because with the way technology changes, like, who even knows what podcasts will be in 3 or 5 years. So I'm focusing more on the next year, like, want to continue to reach listeners. You know, I've got my listener goal of 20,000 downloads an episode right now. And the only way to really get that or do that is to continue to put the good work out there and like let people see it, let people listen to it, get their hands on it. So being a little bit more proactive in the way that I've been pushing it so far, because excuse me, even though it started as a passion project and now has morphed into something bigger than that, it holds me back a little bit from being like, ooh, are you acting in integrity if this is supposed to be a passion project and a side project, if you're really putting all of this effort and marketing and different things into it? So I've been really like grappling with that narrative lately and realizing that like I can do both. Like, it can be, I can be passionate about it and I can market it because I'm passionate about it, because I know that these conversations are changing people's lives, because I know, like, someone stopped me the other day. I'm in my hometown right now. Someone stopped me the other day that I hadn't seen in like 15 years. And they're like, Lindsey, I listened to your show. And like, it was an episode I did with a sex therapist. And they were like, I had the courage to talk to my partner about this thing. And I was just like overwhelmed with joy, because I was like, that's the whole goal. Like, that's it. And so if marketing that more means that more of those conversations and people's partnerships get to happen, like, that makes that effort worth it.
I love that. Absolutely love that. So you said the goal would be 20,000 downloads, which, if you guys know anything about podcasts, like, if you get like 500 downloads in the first 7 days, like, you're in the top 1%. That means that she's got lofty goals. And I know that she's already way above that. So how many downloads are you currently getting right now?
I'm averaging just about 3,000 an episode. So some of the hitters are like a little bit more, depending on the guest, but yeah.
But again, I'm telling you guys, 3,000 puts her in the top 1% of downloaded episodes for podcasts. So that's unreal. For me personally, I'm getting, again, because I put some of my stuff on YouTube now, so I've diversified where it is because of video. I'm probably getting about 100 per 7 days in my first 7 days. So you can really see the difference. She is killing it. She's a rock star. So I'm envious of her. Again, one of the reasons I bring her on is this is a great way for me to learn some tips and tricks of how I can become better in all aspects of my life too.
Awesome. Thank you, Randy. Yeah. And it comes down to like, you are embodying exactly what we talked about before. Mm-hmm. Like if you want to set yourself up for this goal or this success, you have to center yourself around people that are going to help get you there. And that doesn't mean like asking for help is not a weakness. Like the goal is not to recreate the wheel. It's to make the wheel more efficient. Right. And I was talking to one of my girlfriends about this. We're equating it to like, if I had the cure for cancer and I wasn't willing to share that with someone, like that'd make me a pretty garbage person. So like, why would I operate in that same kind of like, I want to operate in an abundance mindset, not in a place from like, oh, I need to keep all my secrets to be mine, because a rising tide lifts all ships. So if we can create an industry standard that brings everyone up together, like why wouldn't we do that? Like,
you're the queen of sayings. I love this. A rising tide lifts all ships. That's awesome.
It's true. It's so like if we can lift the industry, like it doesn't make my piece of the pie smaller. It makes the pie bigger, right? Yep. Everyone can get a bigger slice. So
Lindsey, if people want to find you, if they listen to your podcast, see you in social media, how can they look you up? And then of course, just go in the bio, you'll see it too.
You'll see it. Swipe up.
I'm not there yet with enough followers to swipe up. I apologize.
We'll get there. We'll get you there. We're going to rise the tides, right? So you can find me on Instagram. My personal page is at Lindsey Taylor Locke. I put, a bunch of show assets up there and just little things that I'm thinking about, or like journal prompts, things that I've been wrestling through at the time. So it's kind of like a live, like diary or journal. So if you're interested to get into my head at all, like check me out there.
She'll post videos of herself monologuing in her car, which I know we didn't talk about, but they're very intriguing. I love it. Side note, I love that car videos have now become a thing of like take interviews from your cars. Like I love it. It's just so unique.
Hell yeah. It's like the comedians in cars getting coffee or whatever.
Yeah, with Jerry Seinfeld.
Back in the day. Yeah. Or car karaoke. That's my favorite thing. Get ready, because that's going to be on the story next. Yeah, so my posts are a little bit more dialed. My story can get a little bit, it's Lindsey, right? It gets real Lindsey.
More stream of thought, we can say.
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Lindsey Taylor Locke. You can check out the podcast, Get Psyched. It's on all of your favorite streamings.
Does it come out a certain day or time, or is it kind of just one episode?
Nope, every Thursday.
At what time?
First thing in the morning.
First thing in the morning. So wherever you are, Thursday, check them out. Get Psyched with Lindsey Locke. Lindsey, thank you so much for coming on. Any final words that we haven't talked about yet?
No, guys, just like get out there, get psyched, do you, live in alignment. Keep listening to Randy. He's putting out awesome content.
Thank you so much. My name is Randy Silver, as she just said. This is the Leap of Faith podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple, any of the sites, thank you so much. Please go ahead, if you can, move to YouTube, because you're going to see Lindsey's beautiful smile. You'll see my mediocre smile from braces. Appreciate it. All the assets I got are on YouTube. We have weekly videos, everything like that. So please go watch it. Please go subscribe. Please go rate, comment. Appreciate all you do. Lindsey, thank you so much for coming on today. Now it's time to do our sign off. Do you know the sign off?
I don't. Lay it on me.
So repeat after me. Stay healthy.
Stay healthy.
Stay wealthy.
Stay wealthy.
And have a good week, fans.
Have a good week, fans.
Deuces. Bye, everybody.